Alan King. And Alan King not only grew up in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, but he married in the East Midwood Center in 1947. He married the richest girl in the neighborhood. And guess how she got her money? Her father was named Sprung, and he had a monument business. So people died, he made money. And so Alan King tried out for comedy. Wasn't very good at first, so he tried boxing. He actually started his comedic career on the Major Beau's Hour, where he's saying, "Brother, can you spare a dime?" Didn't work out, so he became an amateur boxer, and his name was Nyberg. And he went up to Canada to fight a black fighter named King, who beat the hell out of him. He gave up boxing, and he took the opponent's name, Alan King. And he started his career for two famous stars opening their acts. One was Frank Sinatra, who told him, "Look, kid, I want you to do 12 minutes." But he got such a response from the audience, he did 18 minutes. And to do 18 minutes from Frank Sinatra and his mob connections, but he was so good, Sinatra forgave him, let him live, and he continued. And then when Judy Garland, I don't know, has anyone seen the new movie? It's wonderful. It's sad. But Judy Garland was making a comeback after her drug days, and he opened for her and was an important influence on her stability for a while. Alan King was part of a blended family. He was only one of two children, but in his autobiography, he claims that 10 children lived in his family. His parents brought in all the foster children, orphans in the family. So 10 people grew up. He remembered on the wall, there's a picture of Moses on one wall and a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the other wall, a New Deal hero. And he said he didn't know who to worship. Should it be Moses or Roosevelt? So he developed a kind of, he says, well, there are three worlds: Die Welt, Jene Welt, and Roosevelt. And so he grew up tough, angry, but he was very into civil rights. So he marched with blacks, with Dr. King at Selma. He was instrumental in helping black comedians like Dick Gregory and others break into Las Vegas. And I remember him coming to the Catskills, to Kutcher's, the day I gave a paper on him. He was very rich, he was very sick at the time, but he wanted the action. So he came up to Kutcher's that night, remember? And he quoted Susie Essman's great line, "You know, folks, I don't need the money, but I need the action." But, you know, you see, my ego has grown so big, it's bigger than my prostate. And then he said, told a joke that is so typically Jewish, and it's part of a tradition of bringing people in. He said there was a man living in a shtetl who was hated by everyone. And no rabbi in the whole shtetl would speak at his funeral. So they had to go to a very distant shtetl where a rabbi agreed to preside. And at this funeral, the rabbi said, "Shmulek, lying here, was an atheist, a thief, a wife beater, a scoundrel. Had he died 20 years ago, the whole world would have been better off. But sitting in the front row are his four brothers who live in my town. And compared to them, he was an angel." Tell it. He also did a bit as a rabbi in a movie that I loved that never got the cachet that it deserved. It was called Bye Bye Braverman. It's where a bunch of Jewish intellectuals are going from Manhattan, where they live in Greenwich Village, into Brooklyn with a cab driver, played by Godfrey Cambridge, who speaks Yiddish. And they get lost. And they come into, as that happened to me a few times, they went into a funeral, wrong funeral, because there were all these funeral parlors on Coney Island Avenue, and if you didn't bring the card, you were liable to wind up. Anyway, he's the rabbi there, and he gives a very eloquent sermon, and he said, "A man lives, and he dies." Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And he walks out. One of my favorite bits, and it's in a movie that I'm in, called When Comedy Went to School. Alan King performed also at the London Palladium. And at that time, Queen Elizabeth and her husband came, and like the predecessor, the Danny Kaye scene, they sat in the front row, like Serena just did. And after the show, they were introduced formally. And Queen Elizabeth said, "Hello, Mr. King." And he replied, "Hello, Mrs. Queen." And that was the way Jewish humor operates. It takes the high and mighty and brings them down to the common level.